Okay, now that we've had that little prologue, we are going to get started on the bottom of Menachos Peiches Amud Aleph. Mirza Hashem, we will push toward the bottom of Peiches Amud Aleph, see how far we can get. Revius Mahoisa Mishameshes. What was the utility of the Kli that was a revius? What was used for it? So we're not going to go into the belly of all of these halachos. We're just going to kind of read them. But the revius was used for the mayim limitzora. That's how much money, how much water, was used for the mitzora. Urevius shem and the nazir. In regards to a nazir, we also used the revius of oil, and that's what we use the revius for. Next, what did we use the chatzi log for? Mahayam b'shamish. Chatzi log mayim l'sota. That's how much water was used for the sota. We know she drank it. The chatzi log shemen toda. We also knew that for the toda, we used the chatzi log shemen. Now we're going to see a machlokes. Ubelog hayamode l'chol menachos. There was a log for every isaron of a mincha. Afilu mincha shel samech isaron nosein la samech log. 1-to-1 ratio. For every isaron, there was a log. That was the Tanakama. However, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, afilu mincha shel samech isaron, ein la ela luga. There's only one. So is it 1-to-1 ratio? Or no? No matter how many esronos are being brought, we only bring one log of shemen. And why does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hold that it's not 1-to-1 ratio, but rather just an objective singular log shemen? So here the Gemara says, the pasuk, the Mishnah says, Shneimar lemincha v'log shemen. La mincha v'log shemen. Whatever the mincha is, you bring one log shemen. So we're going to have to deal with the fact that the psukim seem to be in his favor. Shisha lepar, we need 6 lug for a par. Ve'arba le'ayil, and we need 4 for an ayil. Ushlosha lekebes, we need 3 log for a kebes. Shlosha umechza lemenorah, we need 3.5 for the menorah. You can already do the math. We know that there are 7 cups of oil. It was a 7 menorah. Our menorahs are 8, really not reflective of the Beis Hamikdash in that way. And chatzi log l'chol ner, so 7 times chatzi log times a half is 3.5. That's why we said shlosho mechzis, 3.5 log of oil that was used for the menorah. That brings us to the Gemara. 2 lines from the bottom on Peiches Amud Aleph says the Gemara, Yosef Rebbe, the Kakashale. Rebbe was sitting in the base medrash. She was struggling with something hard to imagine. Rebbe is lama nimshacha. Now we know that a lot of the kalim that were utilized in the Beis Hamikdash, they first had to be sanctified with the Shemen HaMishcha to make them holy. We spoke about the Shemen HaMishcha the other day because that was the only one that had a hin measurement. Anyways, here, why did we have to sanctify the revis with the Shemen HaMishcha? Imitzora, if the reason why you think we needed to sanctify the kli of a revis was because of the mitzora, chutzu, that activity wasn't done in the Azara. Look at Rashi. V'halo b'chutzayu. Kol ma'asav b'shar nikanor below b'azara. It was at a different door in the Beis Hamikdash, not in the Azara area. V'i nazir. And if you want to say that the reason why the revius kli was because of the nazir, that we said that there was a shemen, right? So that's also not true because lechem nazir b'shchitas ayil hu dekadish. The bread becomes holy not from what was put in the kli, not from the kli sharis of the revius, but rather from the shchita of the ayil. So again, why is it that we needed the revius to be sanctified with the shemen hamishcha? What was the point? Says the Gemara on the top of Peiches and Beis Amrlei Reb Chia Sheba Yemode Lechavite Kohen Gadol Revius Shemen L'Chol Chala V'Chala. It's so hard to understand why Rebbe didn't know the answer to this. We learned about this a blot ago. This isn't something esoteric. It isn't something out there. I don't know the answer to this question, and I'm sure there is one. I just don't know. Maybe Rebbe was young at this tkuf. I don't know. But his version of young is not. I mean, it's Rebbe. So I don't know the answer to the question. But the Gemara says that was what Reb Chia responded to Rebbe, that we used the revius kli for the chavite kohen gadol, that there would be a revius of chala for each of the a revius of shemen, for each chala, and therefore we needed this kli to be sanctified by the shemen hamishcha. When Rebbe heard this, he said about Reb Chia, "Kari alei me'eretz merchak ish atzasi." There's a man from far away who gave me advice. Rashi says that Reb Chia, we're on the first of the very short lines of Rashi, Reb Chia ala mi Bavel le'Eretz Yisrael. So he referred to him by the pasuk in Yeshaya, where it says Me'eretz merchak ishat sasi, that he's from a distant place, referring to Reb Chia, that how gevaldik he is. The next question the Gemara raises is Chatzilog Mahoya Meshamish. Our Mishnah had indicated what was the goal of the Chatzilog. And if you look back at the Mishnah, what we said is that the Chatzilog was used for the Mayim, for the Sota, and the Log Shemen for the Toda. So Yosef Rabbi Vikakashile, again, Rabbi said, I don't understand. Chatzilog lama nimshach. Why did we have to sanctify the Kli of the Chatzilog? Isota. If you want to say that the reason why we had to sanctify the Chatzilog was because of the Sota, the water that we started with for the Mesota, that water was already sanctified. It was from the Kior. So we didn't need the Kli to already be Kadosh. It was already, we didn't have to worry about that because the water was already Kadosh from the Kior. And itoda, and if you want to say that the reason why the Chatzilog utensil was nimshach with the Shemen HaMishcha was because of the Toda, that's also not true. Lachme Toda b'shchitas Toda the kache. The breads of the Lachme Toda, when do they become sanctified? With the Shchita of the Toda. So Nachma, we don't need the Kli. So Reb Chia answers, so the Gemara says, Amar le Reb Shimon b'Rebbe. Reb Shimon, he's the child of Rebbe. He says to his father, Shabo hoya mechalek chatzilog shemen l'chol ner v'ner. No, we use it for every single candle, the chatzilog. Remember, at the end of our Mishnah, we said it was 3.5 log divided by 7 is chatzilog per candle. Again, why didn't Rebbe know this? Why? This is like Mishnayos with your tati. It's Reb Shimon learning. I don't understand. Was it at an educational moment? Was he asking a question just to draw out from his child? I don't know. But these things are Mishnayos that Rebbe wrote. It's hard to understand. Just I don't get it. Okay. Amar lo. So what did the father say to the son? What did Rebbe say to Reb Shimon? Because his son gave a gewaltic answer. Ner Yisrael, you are going to be the candle. You're going to be the light of Israel. Kachaya. That's in fact exactly why we had the Chatzilog. Next, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rebbe, Ner, if we had one of the candles of the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, Shekavsa, that went out over the course of the night. So that says the Gemara, Nidashen Hashemen and Nidashna Hapsila. They go to the Beis Hadeshen, they're now useless. There's nothing to them anymore. They're done for. So Ketzad Osa, what should you do? Says the Gemara, 2 lines before the wide lines on Peches and Beis. Says the Gemara, Mitiva, you clean them out, Venosim Bashem, and you refill them, Umadlika, no problem. Simple, just fill them up. Says Yosef Rebbe Zrika, V'kamibayle. Reb Zrika says, wait 1 second. Shehunosim Bashemen, when you are replacing shemen for the candle that went out, what do? Do you do Kimida Rishona, the initial full amount of the Chatzilog? Is that what you do? Oh, Kimosha Chasra. Or do we do the amount that's missing? Now we know how much was utilized. We can look. We see this on Hanukkah all the time. If you buy the junky oil ones, they burn out after I know how much is left, so I can replace. I know exactly what to do. So am I putting in Mida Rishona, or am I putting in Kimosha Chasra? Amar Rabbi Pshita de Kimida Rishona. It has to be that we're replacing with the initial amount. The Kimosha Chasra, if you want to say that it's based on how much was missing. How should we know what's missing? And even if you want to say, well, don't worry, I know how much to measure because I see where it burnt out. I see that there's half of that half log. I see still of whatever it is. Imkain sheva midos. How can you say that we only have 7 kalim? After all, if you're going to say that every kli only gets used once, and we always have to refill a kli with what was missing, then nafish lo midos tuva. We're going to have way more than 7 cups. You're going to have way more than 7 measuring instruments. It's going to be ridiculous. Says the Gemara, Givaldic answer, Kari ale, Ve'aderech tzalach rachav al dvar emes, ve'anova tzedek. May your path be successful, riding on what is considered truth and humility and righteousness. Good answer. Therefore, we know, Lamaisa, that if, please God, the Beis HaMikdash should be rebuilt soon in our days, that if the candle does go out, you replace it with the full midah of Chatzilog Shemen, like it was, even if it's an hour before the end of the night, we refill it with the full amount of oil. Exactly. 4 lines into the wide lines, and now we're going to see a more express version of this. Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Ba'amri La, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Amar Rabbi. Ner Shekavsa, Nidashin Hashem, and Nidashna Psila. We agree. They say that if the fire went out, then you're done for. Ketzarotza, how do we solve this problem? Mitiva, Venosein Bashemen, and here we have added words, Kimida Rishona, Umadlika. We didn't have to, but now we're not asking the question anymore. We've inserted the answer into the Memra, so there's clarity in regards to what the halacha should be. Next, and this is fascinating, and I don't know how they did this. Amar Rav Huna Berei de Rav Yehuda. Amar Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes is our key person right now. Ner shebemikdash shel prakim hava. How would you have defined that? Shel prakim? We would have said it was piecemeal. It was made in pieces. It's incorrect. We know that's not true. It was miksha achas. Came out whole. So says the Gemara, says Rashi on the side here. Rashi is almost halfway down. Dibar maschel shel prakim haya. Shel chulios lo shahaya yachod litlan. You couldn't take it apart. Elamina menorah atzma hayu haneros. They were all connected. Kidichsiv miksha. Elahainu shel prakim shayu kanim shabahem haneros kavum dakim harbe. They were very thin. Vayayachol lekofefan ulehatosan lemata b'shas hatava. You were able to bend them down towards you. They were so thin in order to clean them out, ulahash lechadeshen, and dump them out, chutz, ulezokvan b'shas hadlaka. Namely, they were flexible types of metal. I don't know. First of all, the word prakim does not mean flexible. It means pieces. That's how we would have said you made it in prakim, as we would have said it in Gemara language. But Rashi's clear, and there's no question from the continuation of the Gemara that that's what's happening, that there was some type of construction where you could actually bend the gold. It was still miksha achas, but you could bend the gold to empty it out and clean it out and then stand it back up. Exactly. So this is Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes holds, let's get back to where we are, a third of the way down. I mean, you and I both know it would have cracked at some point. You do that every day. You know, there's got to be a wear and tear, a breaking. And I would have argued, okay, maybe there's metal on the inside. No, it's miksha achas. So I don't know the answer to the mechanics. Maybe it was an ace. I don't know. But it seems that the stem under the actual candle, where the oil was flexible. There were stairs. There were stairs. Because you can't see into the top. So they wanted to clean it out. They had Menachos, Malkoche. We're going to talk about those shortly too. I don't know. What if the Kohen was tall? I don't know. I don't know. There were two stairs that were kind of built into the base of the frame. So I don't know. But Rav Sheshes' whole nakuda here was that it was leprakim. It was, again, it's hard saying this because the words don't translate this way, but let's just say for our purposes, it was bendable. It was flexible. Kotsavar, kiksiv, kikaru miksha, a menorah v'neroseha ksiv. It was all one piece, the menorah and its candles all the way at the top. And kevan demiboya hatava, since we had to prepare and clean out and refill the candles at the top with oils and wicks, ilav de prakim have, had it not been that it was bendable or flexible, lo hayim we wouldn't have been able to clean them out in a proper way. Says the Gemara, hold on 1 second. Meisve, we have a brisa. This is a brisa. If you look on the side here, I don't know what this means. Please tell me if anybody knows. I don't know what this means. In Oskatan Dalad, brisa de Meleches Hamishkan Perikyud. Is anyone familiar with a Tanaic source called Meleches Hamishkan? I feel like in Am Haaretz, I must be missing something. Is it referring to Maseches Tamid? I have no idea. Stan, anything? No? Anybody else? No? I'm not familiar. Don't know. So what does this brisa say? Ketzad ose. How do you prepare the actual candles where the oil goes into that piece? Misalkan. You remove them against Rav Sheshes already. Umanichan ba'ohel, you put them into the ohel. Umakanchan besvog, you wipe them out with a sponge. Denosin ben shemen umadlikan, then you refill them with oil and you put them back and then you light them. So what do we see from over here? That from this brisa from Meleches Hamishkan, again, I don't know what the Marimakom is, but this brisa is against Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes wanted to say that it was bendable, flexible, but over here we see that they were misalkan. Says the Gemara, no, who? Rav Sheshes disagrees with this. Who de Amar ki haitana? You're right. There is a brisa that disagrees with Rav Sheshes, but Rav Sheshes has another brisa that agrees with him. This brisa that from the Meisvei Maskim that doesn't agree with Rav Sheshes. But what we're talking about, the source that's going to work for Rav Sheshes is this: to Amar ki Haitana Detanya Chachamim Omrim Lo Hayu Mezizino Sami Mekoma. We did not remove them. We didn't even move them. We left them where they were. Michlal, says the Gemara, asking on the Chachamim of this new brisa, that iboile leozuza mati mazizle, a bit of an interesting diuk. The Gemara feels that because it said that they were not mazis and that they didn't move them, they could have been moved, but they didn't. As the Gemara says, maybe they were taka movable. Ela Ema, says the Gemara, no. Lo hayasa zazami makoma. It couldn't be removed. It was bendable, but it couldn't be removed. So this brisa obviously supports Rav Sheshes. They were all connected. Uman Chachamim. Who is this author of the Chachamim who holds, like the brisa we just saw, that supports Rav Sheshes? That's Rabbi Elazar. Who? The Gemara says it's Rabbi Elazar, and there's on the side here it says Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, because normally when we refer to Rabbi Eliezer, that's a different person. This is a Tana, and it's Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok, and they had to add in that name because we don't want you to think it's Rabbi Eliezer, different person. Titanya, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Tzadok Omer, Kimin Tas Shel Zahav Haya La Al Gaba. There was some type of plate of metal, of gold on the top, and Kshumativa Dochlo Kape Pia. You would kind of turn everything toward the mouth. Again, we don't know what exactly the logistics are here. And Kshunosim Bashem, and when you'd fill it up, you'd straighten it back up again. Dochlo Klape Rosha, you'd stand it up again. Now, what we did highlight is that the Meisvei holds differently than Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzadok. So let's now highlight this still more. 2/3 of the way down on Peiches and Beis. Ubeplukta Tahani Tanoi Detanya Menorah v'Neiroseha Baos Mina Kikar. Obviously the menorah, but not only the menorah, also the Neiroseha, also the place where the oil went. They were all Mina Kikar. They were all attached to the same thing. However, ve'ein malkacheha umachtoseha Mina Kikar. But the tongs and the spoons, the scoops that were used to clean them out, they were not necessarily from the same piece of metal. Reb Nechemia Omer, no. Menorah haisa ba mina kikar, but velone roseho malkocha machtosa bos mina kikar. What do we see over here? That the brisa of Meisvei sounds like Reb Nechemia, that the piece of the actual nair that the shemen went into was removable, because he says it wasn't part of the kikar. So Reb Nechemia stems with the brisa that says misalkon. Masha'ein Kain, according to the Shita Reb Sheshes, he is supported by Reb Elazar Reb Tzadok that no, the Neiroseh were actually part of the Miksha. So a little bit of a machlokes. What is the ikar machlokes between the Tanakama and Reb Sheshes, and I should say between Reb Elazar Reb Tzadok and Reb Sheshes on the one side and Reb Nechemia on the other? Says the Gemara, Bahai Kra. There's a pasuk that they argued about. Titania, 12 lines from the bottom. Kikar zahav tahor ya'aseh osa. Lamadnu the menorah shaba mina kikar. We know, of course, that the menorah itself was kikar zahav tahor ya'aseh osa. Obviously, the bulk of the menorah was all made out of one piece. Minayin lerabos neiroseha. Tanakama wants to know, how do we know that the neiroseha, the actual cups that held the oil, were still part and parcel of the miksha, of the kikar, of that one piece of gold? Talmud es kol hakelim ha'ele. Maybe I should include the tongs and the scoops to clean things out. No. Talmud Omar osa divi Reb Nechemia. So what we see from the brisa is that Reb Nechemia draws the line after Neiroseha, not before. Now this actually is kasha de Reb Nechemia ad Reb Nechemia, because the Reb Nechemia that we saw 5 lines above said velo Neiroseha, and our Reb Nechemia said Lerabos Neiroseh. Says the Gemara, you're right, good question. Tre Tanoi ve'aliba the Reb Nechemia. Now all of that was the Reb Nechemia side of the coin, that the Neiroseha may or may not have been a part of the actual kikar. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korach Omer menorah ba mina kikar pashut ve'ein malkachel machlo seven neiroseha ba mina kikar. So he totally didn't agree. He was straight up about the fact that the cups that held the oil and the wick were not a part of it, and that would align with our shita of misalkan. That we knew that the other pieces, the Neiroseha, the Machtoseh, and the Malkocheha, even though they weren't Miksha Achas, they still had to be made out of gold. So, it says the Gemara, what do you mean? Obviously, they have to be made out of gold. State in Chumash, they have to be made out of gold. Vasisas neiroseh, shiva vehelas neiroseh, veheiral alever panem al kachel machtoseh zav tahor. Why? So how can you learn the pasuk of Eskol HaKelim Ha'eleh that it needs to be out of gold? Everyone knows that. Any kid who's ever learned Chumash knows that. Everybody knows that. We know some of the psukim by heart. Says the Gemara, no, no, no. You missed a nuance. Lo nitzracha ela lefi neiros. The only thing we needed to do was, in regards to the neiros themselves, we needed a shtickle chiddush. Why did we need something to tell us about the neiros? Let's be clear. The neiros is where the wick is going to go, where the oil is going. It's going to be filthy. So Salka Daitza Chamina, says the Gemara, that ho'elupi neiros ashchure mishchar. Since the place where the wick is put in gets filthy and blackened by the smoke and by the oil, so have a mina that perhaps that a Torah chasa al mamonon shel Yisrael. And really, we didn't need to make that piece out of gold because it's going to become filthy. For the Ovid Zav Koldehu, I could use an impure, inexpensive type of gold, but not the real deal, not the Zav Tahor. No, Kamash Malon, that even though it's true that the Neroseha was to get filthy, it's not true. Even though it was true, we still needed to use Zav Tahor, Kamash Malon. And that was the chiddush of the pasuk of Eskol HaKelim Ha'eleh. And the chiddush was that even though you might have thought that because the Neiros were going to get filthy, Afal Pikain, you still can't use cheap Zahav, you have to use expensive gold. Top of Peites Medalef, let's continue. Hopefully we'll get to the Mishnah at the bottom of the page. Chati log shemen letoda. That's what our Mishnah spoke about, that one of the functions of the Kli of a Chati log is that it was used for the Korban Toda, for the oil. Tanya, we have a Brisa. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ma Talmud Omar Bashemen Shnei Pa'amim. The pasuk says Bashemen twice. Really, that's not true. Really, the pasuk says it 3 times, and I'll read the whole pasuk for you. Vayikra Zayin Yud Beis. Follow along. Im al toda yakrivenu v'hikriv al zevach toda chalos matzos bilulos ba shemen urkikei matzos meshuchim ba shamen v'soles morbeches chalos bilulos ba shamen. We've got 3 references in the pasuk. Rabbi Akiva says the first 2 bashemen shnei pamim. Why do we have that? So says the Gemara. Ilu lo ne'emar ela b'shemen echad. If I only had the word bashemen once. Hayisi Omer, I would have made a mistake about the Korban Toda, that Areu Kechol Menachos Lelog. I might have thought that with only one use of the word Bashemen, that we would have thought that the Korban Toda was like every other Korban Mincha. And Achshav Shekasa Bashemen, now that we have a second usage of the word Bashemen in the Pasuk, have a Ribui Achar Ribui, Ve'in Ribui Achar Ribui Elolamite. We have Bashemen, additive. We have another Bashemen, additive. Ribui Achar Ribui is a miut. So we take our Havamina that it might have been a log shemen, miato akasuv lechatzi halug. Brilliant. So Rabbi Akiva says the Torah is not explicit about the fact that the shiur of the oil for Toda is chatzi log. How did we get there? So he says it's because the word Bashemen in the first part of the pasuk was used twice, and each one is considered a ribui. Ein ribui achar ribui elolamite. Regular mincha is a log. Must be this is a chatzi log. That's how Rabbi Akiva learned. So it says the Gemara, ribui achar ribui, chad ribui hu. You're right. It says the word ribui twice, but we needed the first one. The first one wasn't extra. The first one we needed. So if you want to question the third ribui, then we have ribui, which we needed, plus ribui achar ribui, no problem. But Rabbi Akiva didn't say that. He said there's only 2, and that's ribui achar ribui. Says no, it's not. The first ribui was required. We needed that. Says Rabbi Akiva, no, we did not need that, and here's why. 8-9 lines down. Ella, ilu lo ne'emar bashemen kol ikar. If the pasuk had never said anything about the word bashemen, what would have been my default thinking about a korban mincha? That it would have been a log shemen like every other mincha. Hayisi omer hareu kechol menachos lelog. Achshav shenemar bashemen. Since really I needed 0 of them, I didn't need the first bashemen. So now every bashemen is extra. The first bashemen is 1 ribui. The second bashemen is another ribui. And my default thinking that a korban mincha just blandly is going to be a log shemen. Here it's ribui achar ribui. Ein ribu yachar ribu elamayit. It must be that we're reducing the typical log shemen. Miato kasav lechatzi alog. It says the Gemara, Yochel yechatzi log zem yischalek l'shloshes minen lechalus or kikin ulervicha. You might have thought that our chatzi log was dividing the chatzi log into three parts, 0.17 of a log, plus 0.17 of a log, plus 0.17, each one earmarked for chalos, rakikin, uravicha. Says the Gemara, that can't be. And how do we know that? Now we get to the third reference of Bashemen in the pasuk. Kshehu omer Bashemen l'revicha, she'ein Talmud lomar, riba shemen l'revicha. So now we see that there's a ribui. We had miut achar miut. Now there's a third one. We're back to ribui. We know the miut achar miut reduced our thinking from every korban mincha is a log to the toda zachatzi log. But now we have a new ribui. It's a ribui. How does the ribui work? Ketzad? Says the Gemara, it's like this. Maybe chatzi log shemen v'chotzeyu. We know that by the toda that it's chatzi log shemen. So we bring a chatzi log shemen. Chetzio lechalos u'lerakikin. Half, so a quarter of a log, half of the chatzi log, a quarter of the log is used each for lechalos and the rakikin. So of half of the whole, let's be super clear. We have chatzi log shemen. We're going to split it into two parts, 2 quarter logs. Of the quarter logs, 1/8 is chalos, 1/8 is rakikin. The chetzio, a quarter is l'revicha. Okay? So again, we have a chatzi log. 1/8 of the whole log goes to chalos. 1/8 of the log goes to rakikin. And a half of the log goes to revicha. Why? Because by the word revicha, we had another word bashem, and it has to be more than the others. So we have a chatzi log, and it's broken up into 3 parts: quarter, quarter, eighth, eighth, quarter. That's correct. 1/8 by chalos, 1/8 by rakikin, and a half by revicha. It's quarter, quarter. It's eighth, quarter. Yeah, sorry, eighth, quarter of the chatzi log. One. I should say, a measure of 1/8 goes to rakikin, a measure of 1/8 goes to chalos. That's together is a quarter, and a quarter left is for revicha. That was the ribui of shemen that was used by the word revicha. Exactly. So we're splitting the chatzi log into halves, revi'is and revi'is. One revi'is goes to revicha. The other revi'is is split in half into eighths between the chalos and the rakikin. Third of the way down. Amar lo Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Akiva, Ima tamar bekol hayom kulo b'shemen eni shomei. You could talk about bashemen all day. I'm ignoring you. Ella chatzi log shemen l'toda. We do chatzi log shemen l'toda. Uravi is shemen l'nazir, not our sugya. Uravi is, it's in our Mishnah. And ve'achad asar yom shebein nida l'nida halacha l'Moshe misinai. These 3 halachos are not darshan from your fancy bashemen drashas. It's a halacha l'Moshe misinai. What are the 3 halachos l'Moshe misinai that we just quoted? One is that there's a chatzi log shemen l'toda, not because of your bashemen drashas. One is revi shemen l'nazir, which we just saw in our Mishnah on the bottom of Peiches Med Aleph. And the other is achad asar yom bein nida l'nida. This is deep in the belly of the beast of Hilchos Nida. We no longer count this way. But basically, within a woman's cycle, from the day she first gets her period, we assume that her cycle is split in a very unique way. And between Nida cycles, there was 11 days. We're not going to discuss this now. We'll discuss it in Maseches Nida. We'll get there in about a year or so. Good. So we're now at the 2 dots, almost halfway down. Belog haya moded. Right at the 2 dots, there are 2 lines before the wide lines. Tanu Rabbanan. B'mitzora ani. When we deal with a mitzora, a leper who's poor, ksiv, the Torah says, isaron balul vilog. This is not the correct syntax of the pasuk. It's just drawing these 3 words from the pasuk. Limed al isaron shetaun lug direi chachamim. That if a mitzora is going to bring an isaron, he has to bring a log shemen. Reb Nechemia v'Reb Elazar omrim, they argue, afilu mincha shel shishim esronim ein la elaluga. They say it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but rather, even if it's 60, you still only bring 1. Shne'emar lemincha v'log shemen. Here too, it's really not the appropriate. Actually, here it is a quote of the pasuk lemincha v'log shemen. Okay, so that is the machlokes between the Chachamim and Reb Nechemia and Reb Elazar. Reb Nechemia and Reb Elazar Ben Yaakov, Hi Isaron Belul Velog my Avdile. We know that the Tanakama, the Chachamim, held that it was a 1-to-1 ratio. How do you, Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Eliezer, hold that it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but that even if you're bringing 60, it's still only one log? So says the Gemara, because Hahula Gufe, that is to teach us the basic din of Isaron. To Kamar Rachmana, Leisi Chad Isaron. That doesn't tell you how the Isaron correlates to oil, just as you have to bring in Isaron. There's no correlating there. The Idach, what about Reb Nechem and Reb Elazar? What would you say? Lugufe lo tzarech. With the Galid Rachman Agabe Mitzor Asher Gimel Kabanos v'Gimel Lesonos Hacha Dechad Korban Chad Isaron. We already know we don't need the pasuk the way you're saying it, Reb Nechem and Reb Elazar. The Chachamim point out that the Torah already taught us in another pasuk in Vayikra Yudal Gimel Korbanos v'Gimel Lesonos that we have this correlation. The Idach, what would the Rebbe Lazar and Rabbi Eliezer say back? It's trich. No, we did need to teach that din for itself because Salka Daita Chamina that hold the Chas Rachamana Ale La'asuye Bedalus because the Torah is flexible to support poor people. Ema Loli Bay Mincha Klau. I might have thought that if you're poor in a Mitzorah, you're putter. So therefore, we needed the pasuk to just create this fundamental basic din that you need to bring in Isaron. Legamre lo ashkecha. What? Could you possibly suggest that a Mitzorah doesn't have to bring a korban? It's not even possible, even if you're poor. So that was such a funny machlokas, just on such a basic level. It seems from the Gemara, there's a Havamina that the reason why we needed the pasuk to say it is because without it, I would have thought that the Mitzorah is completely putter from a korban. The Rabbanon, let's flip now. According to the Rabbanon, who say that it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Hi lemincha velamog shemen my avdile. How did they learn that part of the pasuk? The part of the pasuk that Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Eliezer used to say that they only had to bring one log, 2/3 of the way down, halfway through the white lines. The Gemara says, "Ahuda misnade mincha shel yivchos midavar aton log." You can't minimize. It has to be a minimum of a log. Umaynihu isaron. There always has to be with a log a minimum of an isaron. V'idach, what would Rabbi Nechemiah say back to that? Tarte mashma. I can learn out both that we need an isaron and that it's one log and not 1-to-1. I can learn both of those things out. So they each have their respective shitas, and they both make it through the test of the shakla v'tari of the Gemara. 3/4 of the way down at the two dots, heading to the Mishnah. Baruch Hashem, we'll have time to get there. Starting to catch up over the course of time here. Shisha lepar arbala ayal shlosha lekeves minalan. How do we know the ratios? The volume, I should say, of the esronos that are brought for a par, that are brought for an island, brought for a keves, 6, 4, and 3 respectively. Dichsiv and iskehem chatzi ahin yela par. What's chatzi hahin? Well, hin Tresar luge havyan. A hin is 12 lug. What's half of that? 6. V'niskem chatzi hahin yelapar. Half of a hin, half of 12 is 6. Look at the pasuk. Shishalapar. So that's how we figured that out. Dichsiv shemen. How do we know? Hin tresar luge havyan. How do we know that a hin is 12? Dichsiv shemen zayis hahin. Uchsiv shemen mishchas kodesh yezeh liladorozechem zeh begamatria tresar havyan. This is a great example, Dad. You love gematrias. This is a great example where we can see that gematrias are utilized on a doraisa level under certain circumstances. We usually use it as a free-for-all with poetic license, and usually we can find correlations, but it's not deoraisa. But there are times in Chazal, this is the second one of Yihye by Nazir, that Stam Nazir is Shloshim Yom, Yud plus A plus Yud plus A is 30. Here also Zayin Hey. By a get, we know that a get is 9 lines, Gimel plus Tes. 12 lines, Gimel plus Tes is 12. So there are a few times in the Torah that we see that gematria is utilized in the real way. So sometimes people are very dismissive of gematrias. Careful. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There is bathwater, but don't throw out the baby. There are times that we have dine deoraisa. This is one of them. At the two dots, 9 lines from the bottom or so, shlosho mechza lemenorah chatzi log the kolner. We know that there are 7 candles, 3.5 log divided by 7 is chatzi log the kolner. Minahani mili. How do we know the Tana Rabbanon? Me'eravad boker. Tein lamidasa shetei dolekes v'olechas me'eravad boker. You need to put in the right amount. What is that right amount? Chatzi log. Davar acher me'eravad boker. Ein lecha avoda sheksher me'eravad boker. Elazu bilvad. V'shiaru chachamim chatzi log me'orta v'ad safra. They're projecting that it needs to be approximately this much. Now, Ika de Amre, some say, how did we figure out that it was a chatzi log? Did we test by filling it up to the top and seeing how much burnt? Or did we test by putting in a very small amount and seeing if it fell short? This is a machlokas. Ika de amre milamala lamata shiaru. Some say that we filled it to the top and then we kept reducing until we struck the right balance. Ika de amre mimata lamala shiaru. Some say we put in very little and then it kept growing. Manda amar mimata lamala shiaru. Those who say that we started with very, very little. I'm just going to use our. We put in an ounce, and then the next night we put in 2 ounces. We kept increasing to see how long it would take to get till morning. How could you do that? Maybe it wouldn't last. But perhaps, says the Gemara, because the Torah chas al mamon and shal Yisrael. Shemen zayis. We learned how to make shemen zayis. 9 levels. It's very difficult to make shemen zayis. Only the purest first drop is the ones that are. It's hard to get. It's very expensive. It's very pricey. So maybe the Torah was chas al mamon and shal Yisrael. So instead of saying let's fill it to the brim, it's very hard to get the right kind of oil. So we said start small. It's okay if it doesn't make it through the first couple of nights. We'll figure it out. And umanta amar mimala lamata shiru ein aniyos b'makam ashirs. You're not allowed to do in the Beis Hamikdash. We don't assume anybody's poor. It's Beis Hamikdash. It's a chashav azach. It's Shabbos. You put out your finest. You put out your china. You put out your silverware. You make it nice. So the Gemara says, no, it's pasnij, that you should have the kli not be full. It can't be. Okay, so those are the two mahalchim. We'll stop right here at this Mishnah. Mir Hashem, tomorrow night we'll pick up at the Mishnah at the bottom of Pei Tes Amud Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful